welcome to our program here on Channel 98. I'm Don Pritchard, and joining me in the studio we have Bridget Frizzell and Betty Gegg from the Church of St. Genevieve, here to talk about a very significant achievement, and that is the 250th anniversary of the Church of St. Genevieve with a small c, as Betty so aptly put it in her article recently. It's a wonderful thing to have happen, and congratulations and welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
And I think, Betty, you're going to tell us a little bit about the history of the church. It was founded, obviously, 250 years ago, which by my calculations would be 1759.
That's right. I would say they petitioned for acreage to put a small log church on in 1754. And it took a while, and of course by 1759 is when they had their first records of baptisms.
Okay. Betty, who did they have to petition to get that?
It said the government, what I read.
So that would be the French government?
Yes.
In Paris. Mm-hmm. So some kind of petition had to come from St. Genevieve, down the river, across the Atlantic, to Paris, France.
I never thought of that, but I guess that's what happened.
And then that's why it took 5 years.
Could be.
I can't imagine that today. Can you imagine waiting 5 years for a decision?
No, of course. We don't know how long it took to build the church either.
That's true. Okay. So they were granted approval to build a log church.
Yes.
And what was a log church like?
I don't know if we have...
Do we know if it was...
There's limited information.
Was it vertical logs like the rest of the buildings around the community?
We assume that they were vertical logs that were built. We just have sketches of what the church looked like, but we have no actual pictures of the church.
Would it have been at the same location where the church is today?
No. It was in the big field.
Oh. So
that's where the town settled.
Yes, right. I remember it till the big flood.
Yeah.
Which came about 1780s, right?
1785 was the flood, and I don't know if it totally devastated the town, but I know it damaged the church.
And of course, there's no remnants of that church today.
Yes, there is actually.
Oh, there is?
In the basement of the church, you will find that under the floor are some of the logs that were used.
So they relocated it too?
Yes, part of the church was relocated, and the new church was built over the old church.
Okay. So that would have been there, about 25, 26 years before they had to move because of the flood?
Actually, the second church at the present location was ordered to be built in 1793. Mm-hmm. And in 1794, there are records of the materials being donated.
Okay.
To build it.
But the original log church, which was out in the big field, was built in 1759, or was when it was dedicated?
That's when the first records from the church.
So it would have been completed then in 1759. And it stood there for, 27, 28 years until the flood of 1785. 85, so that's 20-some years. That's
pretty good.
You think of 20 years. That's a pretty good length of span of time. And how large was the community around the church at that time?
I think they all lived in the big field, so that would give us some estimate.
I guess the exact number, we don't have a record of that.
Was it centrally located and with the agricultural land surrounding it, or was it nearer to the bluffs with the agricultural land going out to the river? Do we know the exact site?
I don't think we know.
There may be some, but I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So I know the French style was the arpents, and they would have that long, narrow strips going out to the river. So in 1785, the flood came. They had to relocate the church, and the rest of the town, in fact.
Right.
It wasn't just the church they moved. We understand a lot of the buildings that are now in St. Genevieve, some of them were.
I believe the Bolduc House is one.
Exactly, yeah. So I think there's a little discussion on whether that was built on site or not. I think that's one of the controversies, one of the fun controversies about St. Genevieve. The exact date of its founding is a matter of some controversy, and I know some people say, no, the building was built here, and others say, no, it was moved.
I know when it was rebuilt.
Yes.
Back in the 60s?
By
I
Mr.
believe.
Connolly.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. James, wasn't it? James Connolly? I can't remember. Anyway, so now we have a log church at the present location of the Church of St. Genevieve. This is now 1785. At some point, the log church became too small.
That was about 1831.
1831. So after it was moved, it stood on that site for another 30, 40 years.
Right.
So by the time it really was outgrown, it was probably close to 65, 70 years old. Did they do any additions to it, do you think, in the meantime? Little lean-tos or something to kind of enlarge certain parts of it?
I don't think so. Not that
Not
early
the
log church.
Okay.
No.
And then the exciting development of building the stone church, the first stone.
First stone
Tell
church
me about that.
was ordered by Father Francis X. Damien and in 1837 that church was dedicated.
Okay, that must have been a big day for St. Genevieve.
It must have been.
Must have been.
Of course, it was part of the United States at that time.
That's right.
The sale of the Louisiana Purchase had occurred about 20-some years earlier, so it was part of the United States. Matter of fact, I do believe the state of Missouri existed at that time.
I believe it did.
Because the state of Missouri was brought into the Union in 1821. So it was Missouri, state of Missouri. And do we have money records from that? I would imagine you probably would have some kind of documentation. I'm sure there probably was a newspaper in the town at that time.
At that time, I don't believe any of our newspapers that survived were in force yet or in use yet.
Okay. So just, we don't have, do you have church records talking about the dedication?
They must have been. I didn't really see those.
There are
Okay.
records of first baptisms.
Yeah,
And marriages.
Sure.
And dedications.
Yeah, I would imagine a significant event such as
Yes.
the stone church dedication would have been recorded, and no cameras there.
No?
Cameras didn't come into vogue until a little bit after the 1830s. It wasn't too far after the 1830s that they had cameras. But you got to remember, I guess, that Missouri at that time was the frontier, and there may have been cameras in New York City, but there weren't any out in the
That's right.
frontier.
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we don't have pictures,
How do we know what the stone church looked like? Do we have a good idea?
No, we don't have a good idea. We
Is there
have
a sketch?
just a sketch is the only thing that's available to us, and we found that in some of the old pamphlets that were issued at different events in St. Genevieve.
Okay. Interesting. We do know the dimensions of the stone church. And I found this to be very interesting, Betty. In your article, you talked about that. Didn't you talk about how we know the dimensions of the old church?
We know how tall the steeple is, but right off the top of my head, I didn't.
I thought I read somewhere that the pillars that are in the church today are basically the dimensions of the old stone church.
That's right.
Okay.
That is right.
All right. I thought I'd read that.
Yes.
And that's interesting. It fit inside those pillars. Matter of fact, the other neat thing about this, that when the new church was built, and I'm sure Betty's going to tell us more about this, they actually built around the stone church.
That's right.
And people still you had services, you had
That's
mass
right.
inside the old stone church while the big church was being built around it.
Amazing.
Isn't that something?
Another thing interesting, when they began the present church in the early 1870s, there was questions. Should we build a bigger church or should we build a second church?
Ah.
And they determined that we want to stay together.
At that time, were there parishes out in Ozora and
No.
Bloomsdale and down at out at Weingarten's?
Wait a minute, there were.
Okay.
Those came about around the 1840s, 1850s.
Okay. So this would have been a second church within the confines of the St. Genevieve Parish. So that would have been very close by. Are there any other churches in the county that perhaps do not exist today that would have been constructed?
Not Catholic churches.
Okay. Yeah, that was the question. Because I know there are some towns that appear on the map but aren't there anymore.
That's right.
Like Mosher and Tomure and trying to think of some of the others. And of course, New Bourbon.
That's right.
And I'm just wondering, did they have churches in those?
No, I'm sure they were all part of the Church of St. Genevieve.
Okay. Fascinating. So let's talk about the decision to make a larger church. Some controversy. Was the town 50-50 on a second church, or was it pretty unanimous to go with the larger church?
We don't have records of that either. I guess we'll just have to use our imagination. I can just about see what it would be like. No, we don't want to split up.
Mm-hmm. Well, that would be very trying.
Yeah.
Especially.
And where would we draw the line? Who will belong to this church and who will belong to that one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be difficult, especially if you're dividing families.
Right.
And you would be very probably dividing families, and that's, oh boy.
That's a no-no.
I'm sure glad they didn't do that.
Yeah.
Though that would have been interesting if there had been two churches and you may have had two schools, two Catholic schools in town. And
possibly.
That would have been an interesting situation. Anyway, let's talk about the new church, which is really quite old itself.
That's right. 1876, the stonework was begun. It was built at a cost of $24,000. That's amazing there. And it was dedicated in 1880.
And what do we have from that dedication? Are there photographs? Because there would have been photographs from that era, because they really came into vogue in the Civil War.
I don't remember seeing.
No, we've looked through some of the old pictures.
Really?
We
And
haven't
nothing
come across
that far back?
That far back. Unfortunately.
I can imagine that must have been a big day, because that. Do you remember when they replaced and refinished the cross at the top of the church steeple? Not too many years ago,
Yes,
Betty?
I remember that.
Remember that?
Yes.
We have that on videotape.
Do you
And
really?
occasionally we'll show that on Channel 98. Yes. Fascinating.
That was fascinating. We really was watching.
Wasn't that something?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking what it must have been like to do that originally, the first time it was put up there.
So tall.
Exactly.
Working way up
The
there.
scaffolding and such, and I can see in 1880 they may have had a steam-powered derrick to assist in that. I don't think they would have had electric motors in 1880.
Some of the original wood that came from the old church is an existence from the choir loft that goes up to the bell tower. Isn't it amazing? That's still standing up to today's standards.
Isn't that something?
Yes.
That is really amazing. At some point, I think it would be fun to go up all the way to the top of the church steeple and take a look at the view. It must be marvelous.
Must be magnificent up there.
Yeah.
Quite a view.
Does anyone? I guess you have workers that go up there occasionally. You have bells. Do you have?
Yes, we have bells.
Yes, and the clock.
And the clock, yes.
Somebody has to wind the clock.
Yes, somebody goes up there.
I'm just being facetious. I don't know if you have to wind the clock.
Occasionally it goes off time, yes, it needs to be readjusted.
Well, twice a year, daylight savings time.
Right, yes.
That was something that they didn't have to worry about in the 1880s.
No, they didn't.
Let's talk a little bit about. I want to go back to the original stone church and the construction of the new church around it. I just think that's so fascinating, Betty. What do we know about what it was like? I mean, how long did it take? How long were people having to trek through construction to get to church?
Well, it could have been as much as 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
The stonework was begun in 1876 and it was dedicated in 1880. So I hope that you didn't have to worry about a brick falling on your head when you went into church.
Mm-hmm. And how the old stone church, was it as tall as the the church is today, or was it shorter? I would imagine if they built over it, they would have had to build.
I don't know if it had a gable, according to some of the sketches. I think the gable is part of the new construction. Looked like it was more of a flat roof.
Okay. Fascinating.
Yes.
I just can imagine going to church and having to traipse through construction to
get there.
inside.
I imagine they kept the entryway rather clean for weekend mornings.
Yes, and they probably had to, on Saturdays they would have had to stop work, for Saturday Mass.
That's true.
Of course, on Sunday there
They
probably
didn't
wasn't
have
any
the
work
Saturday
done.
evening Mass at that time.
But and if there were special days during the week, I'm
Right.
sure they would have ceased work, so you
They
wouldn't
would've.
have the sound of the hammers and the chisels and the stone being cut. Was it cut on site, or was the stone quarried somewhere
I
into
don't
the right
remember
size?
seeing.
That we don't know.
I don't remember
We
seeing
haven't read
that.
anything on
So
that.
we really don't know where the stone came
No.
from?
No.
Well, it's held up.
Yeah.
It has.
It's obviously good stone. It's held up. I know that any large structure like that, it has growing pains. It has aging pains, as all of us do. I imagine there are maintenance things at the church. Matter of fact, I do remember not too long ago I read an article about some of the problems that had developed over the years in the church. It's not like you build a building and let it go. You
No.
have to keep it up.
It's like any building. It's maintenance.
Sure. Maintenance.
The windows have been repaired, and panes have been replaced, and the needlers have been changed, and
Furnaces, air conditioning.
air conditioning. of
When
course.
was the air conditioning
And
added? Does
heating.
anybody know when the
I
first air
have no
conditioning
idea.
was installed? I'm sure heating was pretty much assumed as part of the building from the start, but I'm sure in 1880 they did not think about air conditioning.
No.
And there is natural air conditioning, a building like that being with a very high ceiling, it would have been cool inside anyway, at least, not until late in the afternoon, I would imagine, until the stone really absorbed all the heat. And then in the wintertime, of course, that's an advantage because the stone absorbs the heat and then gives it off inside.
To our advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Of course, in the summertime you don't like that, but yeah, interesting. Betty, do you have any more information there you'd like to pass along?
Well, in 1911, they added the hexagonal asp where the altar is now. Before that time, when they built this brick church, they were using an altar area that was in the old stone church.
Okay.
So they built this hexagonal asp and two small transepts, one on each side, like we have it now. They
Sure.
added new marble altars and the baldachin over the main altar. And in 1980, I remember when they celebrated the 100th anniversary of the brick church.
Okay. So the next one will be in 2030. It'll be 150 years, right?
Right.
Yeah. That'll be neat.
More celebrations to come.
More celebrations to come. Well, that brings us to this fascinating year, 250 years of the Church of St. Genevieve with a capital C, which is the people.
That's right.
That's what the church is. The church is a gathering of people, and so it's interesting that that celebration is what we're observing here.
Yes.
Not so much the building, though that's interesting in its own right, but the establishment of the church and the significance of that in this community for 250 years. And Bridget, I wonder if you could tell us about the occasion. What kind of celebrations are planned? I know you've had the first Mass, which was
Which was January 3rd,
right.
which was the opening celebration with Bishop Herman. And we had tremendous gathering that evening, and we will follow up. And the other activities we started for the year is the perpetual rosary, and which means that there will be somebody praying the rosary every hour of every day for the next year, which is a tremendous commitment on the part of our parishioners. And along with that, of course, we have the Adoration Chapel, where there's somebody present every hour of the day. and night. And we're also going to be doing the Chaplet of Divine Mercy on Fridays. So that brings the community together in prayer, in thanksgiving for all the blessings that this community has received over the years. Then in August, we'll be celebrating the members of the parish who participate in the various activities of running the parish, with the committees, the fundraisers, and the choirs, and all of the people that come together to make it a working church, and where people come together in prayer. We're very fortunate with our community in their involvement and their contribution to maintaining this beautiful church, which we hope and pray will be here for many more generations. In August, we will be putting up banners in the church representing the different organizations. So each week will be dedicated to a different organization. And in November, we will be dedicating that month to the parishioners who have died in this year and past members of the church. In this way, we're giving thanks for what they have given us and how they have supported the church and their parish during their time here in St. Genevieve. In November will be the main celebration for the anniversary, and we're not sure at this point whether it'll be Bishop Herman or whether they will, the new Archbishop perhaps will be the person to come down for that occasion. And then in January of 2010, we will have the closing ceremony on January 3rd. So it's going to be, there will be other events that will be going on through the year, but the main focus is the dedication to the people and their service to the parish.
Exactly. I imagine the youngsters who are attending that Valley grade and high school will have a role to play.
Yes, there will be activities surrounding the students during the year. They will be giving tours of the church during their summer vacation. And there will be art competitions going on at school. And there are other activities that will be planned as the year progresses.
Just like Betty remembers the anniversary in 1980.
That's right.
These youngsters forever will remember
this
year and the special
That's
nature
why it's
of it.
important to get them involved.
Surely.
So that they are part of it. They are the future of this parish.
Fascinating look back at history and look forward to the future.
Indeed.
Something occurred to me, Betty, as we were talking. I remember hearing the story of the earthquake in 62?
Something like that.
In which some plaster fell from the roof or the ceiling inside the church.
I think that is true. I think I remember hearing that. I don't remember reading about it.
Because I know one of the older parishioners who told me the story about the earthquake that shook the church, and I think there were people in it at the time.
Yeah, I think
it was during Mass, in fact.
I think it was a wedding.
Oh, a wedding.
Really?
I don't know
That'd be kind of scary to be having a wedding. What kind of omen is this?
Yeah.
That's funny. I'm sure there have been other occasions of things that happened, you know, but that I thought was interesting. The other thing I was going to ask you about is I know there are some burials that have taken place inside the church.
Yes,
there are significant members of the parish that have been entombed there in the church. Do you recall who they are?
I believe it's our first commandants, Francois Lavallee, and one or two of them. I'm not sure how many of those. And I'm not sure if Odile Pratt Valley, I believe she's buried there too.
I think I've seen that.
She donated like 3/4 of that $24,000 to build the brick church.
Interesting.
Isn't Father Van buried there too?
I believe he has been, although there's also the chapel out at the cemetery,
Yes.
and I'm not sure who's out there.
It's such a significant part of the community, you know, to Catholic and non-Catholic alike.
Right.
All of us admire that building, and it's kind of neat when you're coming home from St. Louis and you
To see the
come over
steeple.
Highway 61 and you see the steeple and know you're home.
Yes.
It is a neat, it's a neat experience. Even if you're coming in on 32, you can come over and see it too.
Right.
So, you know, back in the old days when the church was the tallest building in town.
And it still remains the tallest.
I think it
building
does in St. Genevieve. Isn't that neat?
Mhm.
Well, how can the people in our community find out more about the Church of St. Genevieve, the 250th anniversary, or if they'd like to know more about the history surrounding the building itself? Can they come to the church and have tours? You mentioned that there might be some tours with the school children in the summertime.
That will be in the summertime.
Uh-huh.
And during, Betty already has had articles in the Herald,
Mm-hmm.
and there was also an article in the Review. And every week we have something in the bulletin in regards to the events that are
Tremendous
upcoming.
events, yes.
And Betty's doing a tremendous job in keeping us
Oh,
informed.
yes, you did very good.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you'd be inviting folks from the surrounding parishes to join in the celebration as well.
We will. And previous pastors and the Sisters of St. Joseph
Really?
that
That's
were here
great.
for 135
That's
years.
right. We didn't even talk about that.
Yes.
But there was a convent here.
Yes.
For
The
many
Sisters
years.
of Loretta was the first convent.
Mhm.
And then Sisters of St. Joseph were here for 135 years, and they were here until 1995, I believe.
Something like that.
Yes, when
Mhm.
the last sisters left.
Well, I'm all questioned out.
Thank you.
Is there something that we need to mention that we haven't done so, Betty and Bridget?
I think you pretty much covered everything.
Very good.
I think so.
Oh, congratulations again
Thank
to
you.
yourselves and to the parish for 250 years. That's significant.
It is a very significant
It's a big
anniversary.
birthday.
It's a big birthday. That's right. Big birthday.
One thing we forgot to include is the homecoming parade. The Valley Homecoming
Okay.
Parade will be dedicated to the 250th anniversary.
All right. Very
So
good.
we're inviting as many people as possible to be involved with floats. So to make to honor this anniversary.
That'll be probably in October, November.
I think it's about October 10th,
October.
around that time.
Very good.
So all in the planning stage.
Something else to look forward to.
It is indeed, yes.
And the traditions of the parish continue. I know they recently have revived the picnic tradition,
Yes,
And
it's been
that's-
very successful.
and it's been very successful.
Yes.
There's other things that the parish does that are certainly part of the fabric of our community.
We'll also be doing an organ recital possibly, which is presently being planned, and a choral presentation.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
Yes, so there's a lot of activity that's still being planned.
Very good, very good.
Takes time.
Well, thank you both for coming down and visiting with us about the 250th anniversary of the Church of St. Genevieve.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Oh, it's been a wonderful visit.
Thank you.
And we wish you the best this year, and congratulations again. Bridget Frizzell and Betty Gegg, our guests in our program today. And again, congratulations to all members of the St. Genevieve Parish on your 250th anniversary. I'm Don Pritchard.